Okay, are we set to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Lemko, are you all ready to go?
Oh, we are, Your Honor.
And Mr.
Thank you.
Saunders, all set? All right, I am calling file 19 CF 716. This is State of Wisconsin versus James Prokopovitch. May I have the appearances, please?
Deputy District Attorney Wendy Lemkuhl and Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders, as well as Special Agent Jay Yurgis of DCI and Sergeant Roman Ehrenstein of the Brown County Sheriff's Department appear on behalf of the state.
Your Honor, James Prokopovitch appears in person, being assisted by Attorney John D'Angelo. Also at council table is my paralegal, Bonnie Gottfried.
Thank you, and this is the third day of the trial. All the jurors are here, all 15 jurors. Are the parties ready to begin?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor,
Yes.
are we going to address on the record what was addressed
Sure.
off the record? I think
Go ahead,
we
Ms. Lemko.
memorialize that. It was brought to the state's attention this morning that apparently that after we had closed for evidence, there was a request by the media to look at and film or take images of various exhibits. I think that there had been a belief that the exhibits may have been published to the jury and they were taking photographs of that. There's been a clarification that there were items of evidence, in particular, I think the purse, that there were some items of evidence that were manipulated, taken out of bags. I think they were done so with tissues or things in an attempt to maintain no additional contamination of the items. So I'm not alleging anybody intentionally did anything wrong, other than the bottom line is the integrity and credibility of this case and the responsibility of proving it comes to the prosecution. Ultimately, if there's an appellate issue, we have a problem at the back end. Our office, upon the fact that the defendant may be found guilty in this case, would have to address those things. So it's incredibly important for not just the state, but the defense to preserve the rights of this defendant in having a fair and impartial, appropriate trial, and the victims and Vicky's kids, to make sure that this is done effectively and appropriately. So we are moving, and I believe this is by stipulation, our office is going to draft an order that no parties in the public anywhere, I believe that the clerk of courts has been contacted through media for replications of documents or things, to make it easier and clear for all parties, including any of the representatives of the media. We're going to be drafting an order that I believe by stipulation the defense is signing, asking that none of the exhibits at this time be replicated, photographed, that nothing is done to publish out publicly or provide information when it hasn't even stayed within the purview of the jury. The jurors in this case are the only triers of fact, and we want to ensure that they are able to review these documents as we should do under the laws of Wisconsin. So at this time, we're going to draft that order. I think the court's aware of it, but we're asking the court to verbally and just indicate on the record your ruling with respect to that so that we are able to make it clear for all parties in the public. This isn't just directed at the media, it's directed at anyone out there that would fall within the purview and attempt to offer this information before it's even gone to our jury. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. D'Angelo, anything you'd like to say?
Other than we stipulate to what has been put on the record by the district attorney's office. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do agree with the assistant district attorney. We will take a look when the order is presented, and why don't we wait until then? And but I agree with what you said, Ms. Lemko. I will sign the order as it's presented. I'll let both parties look at it and offer their input. So if there's nothing else, let's stand for the jury. Thank you very much. Have a seat, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the trial. And again, thank you for your service in this case. And if you would call your first witness, Ms. Lemko, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state's calling Julie Smith.
Will you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. You may be seated. And will you please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
Julie Smith, Julie Smith.
Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, good morning.
Good morning.
Are you employed?
Yes,
How are you employed?
I work for a dental office.
Do you live in the Brown County area?
Yes, I do.
In which municipality?
The Brown County,
Okay. Sort of out in the county areas?
town of Scott.
Okay. All right. And do you know a person named Marcia Loritz?
Yes,
How do you know Marcia?
she's a very close friend.
Okay. Have you been friends for several years?
Yes, since 1992.
Okay. So going on 30 or so years here?
Almost.
Okay. And in the course of your, I guess, friendship with Marcia, did you at times meet her extended family?
Yes,
And would that include her mother, Victoria?
yes,
And have you previously met or observed her stepfather or father figure, James Prokopovitz?
yes.
Okay. At a certain point in April of 2013, did you become aware that Victoria Prokopovitz was missing?
Yes, I did.
How did you come to learn that?
Marcia called me on the Saturday after she went missing, informing me that she went missing and that they were going to go to the residence to do some searching.
So if you said that was the Saturday after she went missing, and we've sort of heard about Thursday the 25th and Friday the 26th, would that be April 27th, 2013 you're talking about?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And did you assist with any search efforts on that date?
Not on that day. On Monday, the April 29th, I did, though.
So on April 29th, did you go to the residence that Victoria was living at?
Yes.
And do you remember where that was?
The residence
Yes.
on Coonish Road?
Okay. And had you been there previously?
No.
Okay. But you were assisting Marcia and the family with searches at that point?
Correct.
Who else was assisting in the search on the 29th?
Marcia, Andy, her husband, Stacey Deere, Andy Lawrence's coworker and his wife, and James' brother and niece. And Wes came to the home a little bit later after we came back from searching.
Okay, so going back just a little bit, so it was you, Marcia, her husband Andy, and then you said James's brother?
Correct.
That James Prokopovitz's brother?
That's correct.
Okay. And had you met that individual before?
No.
Okay. You just kind of heard that he was Jim's brother?
Yes.
And when you first got there, you said Wes arrived later, so Wes wasn't there originally?
Correct.
But during the course of your search on the 29th, Wes returned home?
That's correct.
And had you met Wes previous to this?
Yes,
Through your friendship with Marcia?
that's correct.
On the 29th, what sort of areas around the residence did you all search?
We went by the Mountain Bay Trail. We headed south. I believe we made it to Anston area, so we went a couple miles, searching on the trail and off the trail.
So you believe it was a couple of miles, you said south, so would that be towards the Howard-Swamico area?
Correct, yep.
And you walked that direction down the trail about a couple of miles?
Yes.
And then what areas did you search after that?
We basically came back to the home. We were all in the yard talking thereafter.
Okay. And when you kind of got back to the residence, did you search the other, I guess, the portion of the Mountain Bay Trail which goes to the Pulaski area?
No, I believe they did that on Saturday, the 27th already.
So your understanding was that area was already searched?
Correct.
Okay. Why on the 29th did, I guess, you help out with the search?
I wanted to help in any way I could. Marcia had called me and I said, what can I do to help you? So
So you were essentially volunteering to help?
that's correct.
You weren't, I guess, specifically solicited to help?
No, I volunteered, that's correct.
And apart from the Mountain Bay Trails, did the group search anywhere else?
Not on that day.
Okay. So about how long, I guess, to walk the couple miles, one direction, come back, were you searching on that date?
I'm gonna say 2 hours, 3 at the very most.
You listed a group of people who were assisting in the search on that date. Was James Prokopovitz one of those people?
No, he wasn't.
Did you become aware whether or not he was at the residence?
Yes.
And was he?
I was told that Stacey and Marcia went into the home after we were there for quite a while. I was told that he was sleeping in the recliner and didn't care to come out of the home.
And we've heard a little bit about the Mountain Bay Trail. Could you describe the trail for us? Is it paved? Is it gravel? What sort does the trail sort of look like?
It's gravel, and wooded areas on each side of it.
And the areas you were searching was mostly, you were sticking to the paved or gravel portion?
Yes, but we did go off into the woods area, looking for anything basically that would help us find her.
Okay. So you heard that Jim was in the residence. At any point on the 29th, did you see him assist in any searching?
No, not at all.
You were searching an area near the residence?
That's correct.
Was it within walking distance of the residence?
No, well, it could have been, but we took vehicles to the Mountain Bay Trail, and then once we were at the trail, then we got out and began walking.
Okay. Subsequent to the search efforts on the 29th, actually before we leave the 29th, when Wes arrived, at that point, were you already done searching?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so you were kind of coming back to the house at that point?
Correct.
Okay, and at that point, Wes arrived?
Yes.
Okay. Subsequent to the 29th of April, on that Monday, did you assist in any other searches?
Yes, there was another search that I did participate in. That was later on.
And do you recall when that was?
I can't give a specific date on that day. I do remember that the rapid search and rescue was part of that. And that would have been a group that was, I guess,
volunteering to help locate Vicky?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess in your recollection, were there several groups that were assisting to help find Vicky?
Correct.
And apart from yourself, several other volunteers?
Yes.
Do you recall going to a search on May 12th of 2013?
Yes, that was Mother's Day. The Rapid Search and Rescue was doing a search just themselves, the professionals. Yes, I did go to the residence on that day.
So you said it was Mother's Day, so it was, would have been a Sunday?
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess what was your involvement on that May 12th search?
Marcia and I had talked the day before. She was needing food items to try to feed the volunteers. So I had volunteered to bring some water and supplies and a few food items to help feed the crew. And so I went to the residence on that day.
And by the residence, do you mean the residence that Vicky and Jim lived at?
That's correct.
Okay. And why did you go there at first?
I didn't know where the town hall was, so I went there and Jim came to the door.
Was there any conversation with Jim at that point?
Yes, when I got there, we had just a brief eye contact at that point, and I told him who I was, that I was there for Marcia, and I needed to drop off some items for the search going on. And as soon as that happened, he looked away and was trying to start shutting the door. And at that point, I said, where do I go? And he said, go take a right. He said, go down the road and turn right. And I really wasn't finished asking where that was because I didn't know, am I going to go right or left out the driveway?
Okay. So I guess based on your perception, did it seem like he was trying to end the conversation?
Yes, that's correct. He was shutting the door.
And at that point, had you finished, I guess, inquiring as to the location of the town hall building?
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
At that point, had you finished talking to Jim about where the town hall was located?
I couldn't because he was shutting the door on me. He didn't want me, I felt like he didn't want me there.
Okay. And do you recall when about that would have been on May 12th? Morning, afternoon?
It was
night?
morning.
And you said you were dropping off like lunch and supplies for the people who were searching?
Correct.
What about on April 29th? When was that search occurring?
I would say we got there shortly after 5. Yeah.
Late April in Wisconsin, was it still daylight at that point?
Oh, yes.
So you could still see.
Yes.
At any point on any of your searches, did you find anything relating to Vicky's disappearance?
No,
And you didn't find Vicky either?
that's correct.
And I guess to this date now, almost 8 years later, have you ever heard from Vicky?
No, not at all.
Have you ever heard anyone hearing from Vicky?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeAngelo?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Smith, did I hear you correctly? You've been friends with Marcia Loritz for 30 years?
Not quite 28, since 1992.
Since 1992, so just about, so not quite.
Correct.
You consider yourselves close friends?
Yes.
Does Marcia confide in you when she's having troubles or frustrations or just having a tough day?
Yes.
She talked to you a lot about her mom being missing.
Yes.
And as far as your conversations with James Prokopovitz, you haven't had a lot of interaction with him, correct?
No.
Would you say that the conversation you had on May 12th was really the only time you talked to him?
No, one other time.
So twice you've talked to him. What was the first time you talked to him?
It was at Stacey Deer's wedding.
So at Stacey's wedding, and then the next time you talked to him was on May 12th.
That's correct.
And you testified that you heard that Jim was in his recliner sleeping when you did the first search on April 29th, correct?
That's correct.
And this is at 5 p.m. at night.
That's when we arrived at the residence, so that it would have been later when we came back after we had searched.
Did you know whether or not Jim was at the residence prior to the starting of your search on April 29th?
No, I was not.
So you don't know. So if you searched for 2 to 3 hours, this is either 7 or 8 o'clock at night that you found out he was laying on his recliner.
That's correct.
Do you know Jim's routine at all?
No,
You don't know what time he wakes up in the morning and what time he goes to work and what time he comes home?
no, I do not.
So it wouldn't be uncommon for somebody in their 70s to be 7, 8 o'clock at night resting in a chair.
That is possible.
With regards to the May 12th search, what time did you get there in the morning?
I'm going to guess, I know it was morning, I'm going to guess 11 a.m.
So 11 a.m., was this a weekday or a weekend?
That was a Sunday, it was Mother's Day.
Okay, so Sunday, Mother's Day, and Jim was short with you, right?
Yes,
Now, being Mother's Day and his wife is missing, would it be understandable that he might be short with somebody, not wanting to talk about the fact that his wife is missing and it's Mother's Day?
that's possible.
And just to be clear, when you did both of these searches, did you find any, well, let's talk about the 29th real quick again. That search, was there any police involvement in that search?
No,
This was just a private party search?
that's correct.
Okay. Did you have any special equipment with you when you went out looking?
No,
No flashlights, no cameras or anything of that nature?
we had our cell phones, so we would basically have a camera in that regard.
Okay.
Flashlights, it wouldn't be needed because it wasn't dark at that point.
Okay. And on the May 12th search, did you physically go out searching that day, or were you just there to help provide food?
No, just provide food.
And to the best of your knowledge, there hasn't been any evidence of Victoria's whereabouts since she went missing?
That's correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Lemko, do you have anything else?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Mrs. Saunders, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Ms. Smith, you were asked some questions about that May 12th contact with Mr. Prokopovitz. When he answered the door, I guess, what did you say, or why did you say you were there?
I was trying to find out where I had to go because I really didn't know where the town hall was. Like I stated before, he was just trying to get me out of there by shutting the door quickly.
Okay. And I guess at that point, you were attempting to drop off food for some searchers?
Yes,
Okay. And he was shutting the door on you?
yes, it made me feel very uncomfortable.
And I guess, did that raise concerns for you?
Yeah, it caused me a gut-wrenching feeling in my stomach.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any recross?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Ma'am, so if I understand you correctly, you met Jim once at Stacey Deer's wedding, and this is the second time you met him in person on the 12th?
That's correct.
So he could have thought you were a complete stranger if he didn't recognize you, true?
That's possible.
So if somebody came to the door and said, hey, I'm looking for town hall, and he didn't know that what you were there for or that you were just another random person, he could have been a little bit shorter with you?
That's possible.
No further questions.
Thank you. You are excused, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If you would call the next, please, Ms. Lemko.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state's calling Rhonda Schmidt.
All right. Barbara, why don't you yeah, thank you very much. we'll do is, we'll-
And then, Judge, I'd ask Ms. Smith to be excused.
Mr. DeAngelo,
No objection.
then Ms. Smith, you are excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. And will you please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
Rhonda Schmidt, RHONDASCHMIDT.
Thank you.
Mrs. Schmidt, are you currently employed?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, that was me,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
That's all right, the masks make it difficult. Mrs. Schmidt, are you currently employed?
Yes, I am.
And how are you employed?
Full-time rep payee
Okay,
for Human Services.
okay. And do you live in the Brown County area?
I do live in Brown County.
Where do you live?
Cottonwood Drive, Pulaski.
Okay. Have you lived in the village of Pulaski for a long time?
I have for 10 years.
And prior to that, were you familiar with a person, Marcia Loritz?
Yes.
And how do you know Marcia?
We used to be neighbors on Altair Street.
And that is in the city of Green Bay?
Yes, that's in Bellevue.
Okay. I guess how long were you neighbors with Marcia?
Probably 6 years before I moved away.
During your, I guess, relationship with Marcia, did you ever come to meet her extended family?
Her sister and her nieces. I don't recall ever meeting others.
Okay. So you had never met Victoria or her stepfather, Jim?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Directing your attention to sometime in April of 2013, did you become aware that Marcia's mother was missing?
Yes.
And how did you come to know that?
I was reading a Facebook post on Friday night, and she posted on there that her mother was missing.
And do you remember when that would have been?
Do I remember when?
Yes.
Well, it was April 26th. It was a Friday night.
So you learned on Friday, April 26th that Marcia's mother was missing?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess, what did you do after that?
Well, I was in disbelief. We talked about that they were going to meet out at the property the following day. I offered to help, to look, and I met them out there the following morning, Saturday morning.
So would that have been April 27th?
Yes.
And did you go to the residence?
Yes, we met at the home of her mother and stepfather.
Okay. Do you remember where that home was?
Yes, it's on Coonish Road.
And that's sort of out, not quite to Pulaski, but out sort of in that area.
Yeah, Pittsfield, it's probably considered Pittsfield, but it's just about 3-4 miles from my house.
Okay.
And it's a familiar road. My boyfriend and I traveled through there a lot, so I was familiar with the location.
So you showed up on that Saturday. Do you remember when?
In the morning,
Okay, in the morning. Okay. And I guess, did you assist in any search efforts?
yes, there was a group that met there. It was me and Marcia and her husband Andy, her sister Stacey, and there was one other person. I don't recall his name or relationship exactly, but I remember he had like a Pulaski Fire Department or Police Department type blue T-shirt on. It was just a T-shirt. And we agreed we were going to walk the Mountain Bay Trail that went out behind the house, behind the property. And we drove down to, on a side road to get to where the trail split. And Stacey and a few went toward the Pulaski. They searched the trail toward Pulaski, and Marcia and me and Andy searched the trail heading toward Howard.
So I guess generally, are you familiar with the Mountain Bay Trail?
Yeah,
Okay. And it sort of runs from, general direction-wise, Pulaski southeast towards the Howard-Swamico area.
yes,
Okay. So you and Marcia and some others searched, I guess it would be southeast then, down the trail?
yes,
Okay. And there were some other people who went, I guess, northwest.
yes.
Okay. And how far do you remember down the trail did you go?
I would say we went to Anston, pretty far, mile or two.
Okay. A mile or two down the trail?
Yeah,
Okay. And did you search any other areas on that day?
no,
Okay. And when you, I guess during the search, did you find anything?
we did not find anything, but when we had reconvened at the property, Stacey had found some kind of a metal angel somewhere along the trail. I believe it was stuck in a stump or a piece of maybe a tree or something. She found some kind of metallic angel.
Okay. You had no personal knowledge of that, though?
No,
Okay. And you don't know where that was found or if it was related?
but I'm only aware that Stacey found it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know that anything developed from that.
Okay. And did you assist in any other searches?
Yes,
And, sorry,
at least two.
do you remember when those were?
The second search was within 1 to 2 weeks. This search had more people from search and rescue, rapid search and rescue. And the part that I was involved in was the tree line that was on Coonish Road, where Coonish Road, which turns into Anston Road, and County C meet. There was a whole tree line there. And our group, there was quite a few of us, and our group searched that with spreading our arms out and all walking in all the way to the Mountain Bay Trail, and then we searched beyond that Mountain Bay Trail that day.
So are you able to approximate how, distance-wise, about how much area you searched on that day?
3/4 mile in,
Okay.
half a mile.
Okay. And there were several other people assisting in the search?
Yes,
And that was, I think, a second search you outlined. You believed you were involved in 3, though?
yeah, I was involved in 3 of them. That was the second one.
Okay. And was that within a few weeks of Vicky's disappearance?
Yes.
And when would the third one have been?
The third one was possibly, it was quite a bit later when, quite a bit later, I mean, probably several months, a month or 2 later, once Rapid Search and Rescue had organized horses and dog teams. There had been some searches that took place with the town hall being the staging area. And so the third search that I participated in, there were people on horses, but we went down Town Hall Road, south on Town Hall Road, and we covered another wooded area that was wooded and swampy. And me and a group of others were on foot traveling through that area while some of the people on horseback were covering larger fields and areas around it.
At any of the searches you participated in, did you see a person you were told would be Jim Prokopovitz?
I did not.
Okay. And how did that strike you?
Odd.
Had you ever met Victoria Prokopovitz?
I have not.
During any of your searches, did you or anyone you were aware of locate Vicky?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Sure. During any of your searches, did you or anyone you were searching with locate Vicky?
We did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. D'Angelo?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Schmidt, you still remain close to Marcia Loritz, as far as friendship-wise?
We're still friends.
Do you talk on a regular basis?
We do not.
But she reached out to you or I'm sorry, you reached out to her when you heard her mother was missing based on Facebook posts.
I did.
And were you in more contact in 2013 when these searches were going on?
Yes, we were.
Did you maintain that contact after the searches you did?
Not as closely or as often.
Okay. Now going to you heard about this on April 26th. So you went out to the residence on Saturday, April 27th, is that correct?
Yes.
What time did you get there?
Early in the morning.
Okay. Was there police already on scene when you got there?
No.
You got there before the police did that day?
Yes, the police weren't involved at that point.
Okay. Do you know if police were going to go search with dogs that day?
Not that day, I did not know.
Okay. And you indicated you went on the Mountain Bay Trail, so you drove to the Mountain Bay Trail and you started walking. I believe you said you walked toward the Pulaski area, but went about a mile or two?
My group walked going toward Howard. The other half of the group, Stacey, walked toward Pulaski.
Okay, so you went towards the Howard area.
Yes.
And how far did you say you went?
I would say a mile or two all the way to Anston.
You know approximately how long it took you to go do that mile or two?
3 hours, 2-3 hours.
And then did you go back to the Cunnish Road residence after that search, or did you go home?
Back to the residence,
And then how long did you stay at the residence?
10 or 15 minutes.
When you got back to the residence, were the police there?
They were not.
And then you went back to the residence, and then you separated and went home after that, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't, on that search on the 27th, you found no signs of Victoria Prokopovitch, correct?
Correct.
You mentioned a metal angel, but you don't know if that belonged to Victoria or anybody else.
That's correct.
Okay. The second search that you were involved in, do you know what day that was?
I'm sure it was a Saturday because I wasn't at work.
Okay, so it was on a Saturday. Do you know if it was still in April or May? Was it within a week of the first search?
I would say 1 to 2 weeks of the first search, so that would bring us to May.
Okay, the beginning of May. And in that search, how long did you guys walk around and look?
Several hours.
So at least 3 hours?
Two, 3 hours.
Okay. And when you guys searched, you talked about staying about arm length apart and walking together. Were you guys moving things and looking around and trying to uncover anything at that point?
Well, we were instructed to keep, look at the ground, and if we thought we saw anything, even a cigarette butt, a lighter, anything, we would stop, raise our hands, and then a person from the search and rescue would come to view whatever that might be and determine if it was significant or not. We weren't touching anything or moving anything unless they determined we should.
Okay. Did you find anything of significance on that walk?
No.
And at that walk, you indicated that there were, was this the one with the horses and everything?
There were no horses on that one,
Not on that one, just people on that one?
just people.
Okay. And again, you didn't recover, or nobody spotted anything of significance or of evidentiary value as far as you know?
Correct.
The third search, do you recall when that occurred?
I don't recall exactly when it occurred. I know it was summer. I know it was nice out.
Okay. Would this be on a weekend again?
Yes.
Okay. And the third search is the one where there was horses. Did they talk about, were these specialized horses or just people brought horses to ride because it covered more distance?
They were part of the rapid search and rescue teams,
Okay.
horses and what they do.
Okay. And do you know approximately how long you searched on that third search?
2 hours.
And were you doing a similar thing where you were kind of walking somewhat arm lengths apart in a group and raising your hand if there's anything of significance?
Yes, it would have been the same way. It was more difficult to be that way because of the terrain was swampy and had trees down and things, but yes, we were spread out.
In this swampy terrain, how deep a swamp did you get into? Was it like ankle deep?
Ankle deep.
Ankle deep, okay. So it's still difficult to get footing, but it wasn't like your knee or waist deep into anything?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think I heard you say that in that search, did you only go about a half to 3/4 of a mile? Is that right?
I didn't put a distance on how far in we went. It was always visible, you were always visible to the road, so I wouldn't say it was really deep in.
Okay. And you were asked about seeing Jim at this search. Have you ever met Jim Prokopovitz?
I have not.
Is this the first time you ever seen him in your life?
No, I've seen him at the memorial that was held a year later.
Okay. But you never had a conversation with him?
Correct.
You don't know his personality in any way, correct?
That's correct.
So to say that it was odd that he wasn't there, you don't know what Jim was going through or what his feelings were, correct?
Correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mrs. Saunders, do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Schmidt, you were asked questions about the areas you were searching. When you were searching, were you wearing a typical walking shoe?
Yes,
Okay. And you were asked some questions, and you described that some of the areas you searched was sort of swampy. Is that right?
yes,
And there was ankle-deep water in some areas,
yes,
and it was difficult to walk in some areas.
yes,
You were also asked questions about sort of Jim's demeanor, and you mentioned there was a one-year vigil. Can you talk about that?
yes. We had the one-year vigil at our house on our property. There were supposed about 100 people there. We had our shop set up to serve food and stuff, and Marcia had arranged for releasing doves in her mother's memory, and we did a balloon release. There was a minister there who had said a prayer. So during the balloon, before the balloon release and the doves, this was taking place over to the, if you're looking at our shop and garage, it's over to the right. And there was the table set up with all the doves on it. And everybody was in a large gathering listening to Marcia's speech. And, we all handed out the red balloons. And we were releasing them. And James was standing at the end of the dove table off on his own rather than being among the crowd.
So James Prokopovitz was at that vigil,
Yes, he was.
and you said this was 1 year, so this would have been late April of 2014?
Yes.
And I guess, what sort of observations did you make of Mr. Prokopovitz's demeanor?
I didn't think he was engaged with anything Marcia was saying or any of the group that was there on behalf of Vicky.
And you were asked questions that you had never met Mr. Prokopovitz before, correct?
I had never met him before.
Okay. The observations you made of him on those occasions, though, did that seem to be a reasonable reaction in your mind?
Not in my mind.
And again, you have never met Victoria,
No, not that I recall.
and the 1 year anniversary vigil to her disappearance was held at your residence?
Yes, it was.
And do you know why that was?
Because the town hall seemed to be getting tired of Marcia using the town hall for the search, for where the searches originate from. And she had mentioned, I had saw on Facebook, I believe, that she didn't know where she could have this held. So I texted her on there and told her, well, let me check with Steve and see, maybe we can have it here. Because we had quite a bit of room on the property and everything, and we were in the area, and it made sense because that's where Vicky lived. That's where this all happened, so we offered to host it.
Sure. So you mentioned the town hall not wanting to have any more events there. Was that because they were hosting a lot of events relating to this search for Vicky in that year time period?
Yes, I believe so.
And it was held at your house, and you volunteered. Did you have any knowledge as to why Mr. Prokopovitz's residence wasn't used?
I do not know.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Danzo. Recross?
Ma'am, how many people were at this vigil?
It was estimated at 100. I would say it's close to that.
So, how big is your home?
It's a probably 1,400 square feet,
Okay.
3-bedroom ranch. Then it has a 3-stall outer building on the property. It's,
So the 3-stall outer building, was that where the vigil was held?
yes.
So it could accommodate 100 people?
Well, the weather was nice, so the food was in that, the shop area.
Are you aware of any space of that nature at the Coonish Road property that could have handled that many people?
No, indoors,
Indoors or outdoors?
fully indoors.
I mean, you didn't know what the weather was going to be, correct?
That's correct.
So it was planned, if it was going to have to be indoors, you had enough space in the 3-stall garage shop area that you could accommodate that many people, true?
Yes,
Okay. So it wouldn't be uncommon not to have it at the Coonish Road property because it's a very small property, as far as housing-wise.
the house doesn't look very big. I don't know what is inside of all the outbuildings that were there.
You mentioned that Jim was kind of off to the side by himself. Did you go and talk to him?
No,
Did you ask him, why wasn't he part of the group?
no,
Did you get any insight as to what his thoughts were that day?
no.
So the observation that he's kind of off to himself seemed odd to you, but since you never actually talked to him, you wouldn't know what he was thinking.
Correct.
So it's a perception issue that you think it was odd based on your own perception and what you would have done, but not necessarily what Mr. Prokopovitch should be doing.
Yes, but the attendees were also members of his own family.
But his own family, everybody grieves in a different way, correct?
Correct.
So you don't know if he's grieving in a different way than other family members such as Marcia or Stacey, true?
True.
And typically, men and women grieve differently.
True.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down then. Your next witness, please, Mr. Saunders.
Yes, Judge. The state will call Scott Simmons.
And you are excused. Thank you.
Will you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated. And will you please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
Scott James Simmons, S-C-O-T-T, and Simmons, S-I-M-O-E-N-S.
Thank you.
Mr. Simmons, are you presently employed?
Present employed, yes.
And how are you presently employed?
A part-time job at Kemp's Ace Hardware in Howard.
Okay. Previous to that, how are you employed?
For the Brown County Sheriff's Department.
And how long were you employed with the Brown County Sheriff's Department?
Brown County, 28 and a quarter years.
Apart from those 28 and a quarter years, did you have other law enforcement experience?
I worked for Winnebago County for 3 and a quarter years.
Okay. So in total, about 30 years in law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. And what was your role with the Brown County Sheriff's Department?
At times, I worked in the jail, I worked patrol, I worked investigative, I worked courts.
Okay, so sort of all areas of the department? Okay. And in April of 2013, how are you assigned?
I was in the investigative division at that time.
Okay. And what were some of your responsibilities in the investigative division?
It assigned cases, investigate them, reference burglaries, sexual assaults, robberies, stuff like that.
Okay. So essentially taking cases that were investigated by patrol deputies and then conducting follow-through investigation?
Yes,
Okay. Were you also, I guess, there's other investigators in the investigative division?
yes,
And would you typically work with other investigators in the course of investigations?
at times, yes.
Okay. In April and May of 2013, were you requested to assist in an investigation with respect to the disappearance of Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes.
And I guess, what were some of the things you were requested to do?
I was asked by Captain Sanborn to get a statement from Mike Shue.
And that individual was identified to you as somebody who worked at McKeefrey and Sons?
Yes,
And the information you were learning is that that is where Jim Prokopovitz worked?
yes,
Okay. And you did speak with Mr. Shue regarding this investigation?
yes,
Did you also, I guess in the course of that conversation with Mr. Shue, learn where Mr. Prokopovitz was working?
yes.
And where was that?
At Georgia Pacific,
And where is that located?
on Broadway Street in the city of Green Bay, Brown County, Wisconsin.
And did you follow up and speak with anyone at Georgia Pacific?
Yes,
And was that May 1st of 2013?
yes, I believe it was Dan Kaiser.
Okay. So you spoke with some employee of Georgia Pacific?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of speaking with that individual?
To gather time cards of when James would have entered and exited Georgia Pacific.
And was it your understanding that that information could be logged?
Yes, I was told they had to swipe a card to get entrance into the gates.
Okay. And also to exit the gates?
Yes,
And did you obtain those records from Georgia Pacific
yes,
with respect to Mr. Prokopovitz's entry and exit times?
yes.
Do you recognize that exhibit?
Looks familiar.
And is that the document you collected from Georgia Pacific with respect to Mr. Prokopovitz's entry and exit times?
Yes,
Okay. I'd move, I think it's 51.
Any opposition, Mr. D'Angelo?
No objection, Your Honor.
Then I will receive it. Thank you.
And did you note the times that were logged with respect to April 26th of 2013?
yes.
And what were well, we'll start with the, I guess, time it logged in on April 26, 2013.
5:31 and 47 seconds a.m.
Okay. And what about the time that was noted as an exit time?
12:35 and 12 seconds p.m.
And did it also log the gates that were used to enter that location
Gate 17,
for both the entry and exit time?
yes.
Any cross, Mr. D'Angelo?
Just briefly. Mr. Simmons, so in order to get into Georgia Pacific, you have to pass a gate with a guard?
I think there's a couple gates that you need guards there. They let you in. Some you need swipe cards, from what I knew.
Gate 17 that Mr. Prokopovitz entered, was there just a swipe card or was there a guard also there?
I don't know if there was a guard there or not.
Okay. And did this information provide any significance to the missing person of Victoria Prokopovitz, in your mind?
That I don't know because I was limited to what I did in this case, and this was about it.
So your sole duties was to get the time cards and to log in and out of Georgia Pacific?
Yes.
Okay. You didn't do any further investigation into this case?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Briefly, you stated that was, collecting the time cards was one of the things you did in this case, right? And you
Yes.
weren't, sorry, and you weren't the lead investigator in this case?
No, I was not.
Did you subsequently forward that information to Sergeant Ehrenstein?
It was put into the case file, and then I believe Sergeant Ehrenstein ended up with the case file, so he would have gotten it, yes.
Okay. No, nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
You can step down and you're free to go. Thank you.
This then.
I'll take that. And if you would call your next witness then, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Mark Blaser to the stand.
Thank you, Mark.
Will you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. You may be seated. And will you please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
Mark, M-A-R-K, Blaser, B-L-A-S-E-R.
Thank you.
Mr. Blaser, if you could just move up towards the microphone. It's a little hard with the shield, and speak as best as you can. Thank you. Now, Mr. Blaser, how old are you?
58.
Okay. And are you employed?
Yes.
And where are you employed?
Alter Recycling in Green Bay.
At some point, did you have cause to be employed with McKeefrey and Sons?
Yes.
And how long were you employed there?
From, I think it was July of 2007 till June 24th of 2019.
Okay. So that would have been approximately 12 years?
Yes.
In the course, and if you could just, the jury's heard a little bit about McKeefrey being an excavating company. When working at McKeefrey, did they typically contract out to other corporations in Green Bay?
Yes.
And what was your position when you were working at McKeefrey, or did it change?
The first year I worked there we hauled PCBs, and then we got laid off in the fall, and then the following spring, we got hired back, and that's because they got the Georgia Pacific sludge haul run back.
We've also heard a couple names thrown around with respect to Georgia Pacific. Is that the former Fort Howard Corporation?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is Georgia Pacific located?
On, I'm just trying to think, it's 1991,
Is it Broadway Street?
yes, South Broadway Street,
Okay. And that's located in the city of Green Bay, Brown County, Wisconsin?
yes.
And when you're outlining the different places that they have contracted with, McKeefrey specifically, at some point, and I'll direct you to 2013, did they have a job where they were working with Georgia Pacific?
Yes.
When you were working there, let's say now 2013, what would you have been doing? What was the course of your employment there at that time?
I was hauling the waste material, the ash, the sludge out of the paper mill out to the landfill by the airport.
Okay. So now when we're talking about sludge and we're talking about ash, we're talking about various types of waste, is that right?
Yes.
And just so the jury knows, what is your understanding of what sludge is?
Paper sludge comes from, and I don't know if I'm 100% right, but I'm pretty close. It comes from the waste of making the paper. It comes out of a vat, and then it goes into the clarifier, I believe, and then it goes from there into the presses, and they squish the water out of it, and then it goes, there was 2 separate bins there, one we called the North Bay, one we called the South Bay.
Okay. And so essentially it's a byproduct of paper.
Yes.
Right. Now besides sludge then, what is ash? And are there various kinds of ash?
At the time when we were there, there was, the mill called it bottom ash, we called it black ash. There was fly ash, and then there was the number 9 ash, we called it red ash. And then there was tin ash, we called it number 10 boiler it was.
So the jury understands with respect to the sludge being the byproduct of the paper waste, the ash, is that actually the byproduct of coal being burnt?
Not, the tin ash was a byproduct of the sludge.
Okay. But the other forms
Was
of ash?
from the boilers,
Okay. So the coal.
right.
All right. And so your job back in 2013, when you would be going to Georgia Pacific for McKeefrey, and as you're going into, now I'm taking you back to 2013, the way it was then, as you're driving into Georgia Pacific and you're going there for work, was there a system for you to be able to punch in or swipe in or something so they'd know you were there?
Well, in 2013, all we had was, we'd get a badge at the gate.
Okay.
And then, you know, then they check us in, and at the end of the day, then you turn it back in. But I don't know if this is relevant right now, but then later on, they made them where we had our pictures on
Yep.
them, so we kept them with us.
Yep.
And then we'd just check in the morning, but they wouldn't have to give us a badge. We'd just swipe it, and away we'd go.
Sure, but that little swipe system wasn't in place in 2013. The badge was?
The badge was, yes.
Okay. And just so it's clear for the jury, once you're entering this realm of Georgia Pacific and you're getting into past whether it's the gate, whether there's somebody checking, once you're in that yard of Georgia Pacific, you basically have access to everything there. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no. You know, we couldn't go all over the place.
Well, let me stop you there. With respect to going into the buildings, it was supposed to be for authorized personnel.
Right.
But once you have now come in there, there is nobody supervising which area you're going into.
Let's put it this way. There was eyes all over that place.
Sure.
You know, there was cameras all over. there was always somebody watching, because there was drivers that got stopped because they were driving too fast in the yard, and there was, there was always people watching you, You'd get there in the morning, you'd pull up on the scale, you'd weigh your truck, and you'd find the loader and get loaded and weigh back out and go to the landfill and come back and do it all over again.
And back in 2013, if there's other individuals with Georgia Pacific that indicate there weren't cameras in some of those areas, you wouldn't disagree with that, you just believed there were.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so you're talking about what you think, but if there's actual people indicating that's not the case, you wouldn't disagree with that?
Right,
Okay. And again, I'm asking you about 2013, right?
right.
And as you've indicated, back in 2013, it appears the procedures were a little less stringent, as you've indicated, that had changed. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. Now, at the time that you're going there, and again, this is just so the jury understands, and I guess everybody, your job in 2013, you were driving what type of machine?
I was driving a dump truck. It was we called it a sludge truck because it had just a big square box on it.
Okay. And at some point in the course of your employment, when you're working at McKeefrey, do you work with an individual who is known as James Prokopovitz?
Yes,
Did he have a nickname that everybody knew him by?
yes, we called him Curly.
All right. And that individual that you know and you're talking about as Curly, do you see him seated in the courtroom here today?
Yes,
Could you briefly just point out where he's seated, what he's wearing?
right over there with a blue shirt on.
Okay. In the middle of counsel table?
Yep,
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant, James Prokopovitz.
Mr. D'Angelo,
No objection.
the record will so reflect.
Now, when you were working at McKeefrey through the years, did you have cause to have contact with Curly?
we talked, but it was just about work. Very, very little outside talk about anything,
You didn't really know him that well?
No, just, it was always, because, I don't know, the only thing we had in common was our job, really.
Sure. You didn't hang out with him outside of work?
No,
Didn't share or strike that. With respect to your relationship with Curly, so basically you're describing it as a work relationship, right?
right.
All right. When you're driving what you're calling as like a sludge dump truck in 2013, do you remember what Curly's job was around that time?
He ran the payloader.
What's it called?
He ran the payloader, the machine that loaded the trucks.
Okay. Is that also called a front end loader?
You could call it that.
Okay. You're calling it a bay loader?
We always call it a payloader.
Oh, pay. Sorry. P-A-Y, payloader.
Yes,
Now, at the time that, and again, I'm talking about 2013, you're working with Curly. In the role that you had and the role that he had, would you sometimes be having telephone communication just to check in about something related to a load?
yeah, I'd call him in the morning when I was turning in the gate, usually.
Okay. And do you recall back then what shift you would have been working?
I usually get there. I don't know, it's been a long time ago now already. Usually 6:30, I think we got there, because we couldn't dump at the landfill till 7.
Okay. So, yeah, so I'm glad you said that. So what you're saying is, at the time that you are contracted out to Georgia Pacific, what does that mean? What are you doing as you're getting these items? Are you transporting them somewhere?
Well, yeah, we transport them out to the landfill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the landfill that you are transporting this out to, where is that located?
Across the road from Austin Straubel Airport.
Okay. And when you're talking about going to the landfill, are there different cells at the landfill where these types of products are being dumped?
Yes.
And some of those cells, are some of those cells capped because they're full?
Some of them are, yeah.
And some of them are open because
Right.
that's where you're putting the items?
Right.
And would there be depending on what you're delivering to the landfill, different ones that you would be putting items into?
Yeah, some stuff would go in one and some stuff would go in the other one.
Okay. So there's multiple ones being filled?
Right.
And the jury will see something later, but with respect to the vastness of this landfill, this isn't something that's just like a block long or anything like that. Would you agree it's pretty big?
I'm just guessing here. I think that land, it could be bigger than that, but I think it's around 100 acres there. It could be bigger. But
Okay.
I'm just guessing.
Sure. It's pretty vast.
Yeah.
Now, when you, we just talked a little bit about telephone contact. When you are working in your role, why are you having contact with Curly in his role? Is somebody taking one thing or moving something? What's your role?
I was just a truck driver there, and the only time we communicate during the day, other than in the morning, is like if he'd switch us from black ash, he'd say next round, go over and get 9 ash or fly ash or whatever, and then, you know, down the road during the day, or he'd say, well, we're done here, go to sludge or go haul, you know, whatever, you know. But
Okay.
there was really never, you know, unless somebody broke down or something, you know, and we'd have to, you know, I'd call them and say, hey, I'm broke down, I ain't coming back, or I'm going to the shop or something like that.
Sure. Now, I am directing your attention to the morning of April 26th of 2013. That was the date that it got reported that Victoria Prokopovitz went missing. Do you recall on that morning having contact or receiving a telephone call from Curly?
Boy, I can't remember just exactly anymore. I mean,
Fair.
it's been so long. I'm sure I talked to him that morning because we always talked, you know, just briefly.
And back around that time, do you recall your telephone number? Your work number?
My telephone number was 920-598-0725.
Yes, okay. And do you remember law enforcement talking to you about the fact that there was a phone call at 6:26 a.m. that morning
Yes,
from you to Curly?
yes.
And then that's 6:26 a.m. At 6:40 a.m., there was a call from your phone to Curly's phone?
Yes,
Okay. Now, if the first phone call at 6:26 a.m. was 0.15 minutes. So less than a minute. Would that sound about right about the amount of contact you'd have with
yeah,
him?
it wasn't very long because I'd just call him up and say, you know, where are we going? And he'd say black ash, fly ash, or whatever, and click, and that was the end of it, pretty much.
So besides that call at 6:26, if the one just 14 minutes later at 6:40 was only 0.22 minutes, again, under a minute, that also would be consistent with the kind of contact you'd have with him on that day?
Right.
Okay. Basically connecting about whatever load there is that
Right.
day.
Right.
All right. Now, you indicated that you didn't hang out with Curly outside work. Do you recall, Curly didn't really come to work functions either, did he?
No, I never seen him at any, really.
And back around that time, you didn't know his wife, Victoria?
No.
Now, when you spoke to officers, you were asked if you recalled that Curly had come into work that morning, and you said that he did. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yes.
And with regard to that, based upon your view of what was occurring, did you further indicate that you thought that was strange?
Yeah, I did. I just, you know, but I guess, after I thought about it, everybody's got their own way of dealing with things, but I wouldn't have went to work. I'd have been out looking for her, but everybody's got their own way of dealing with things, I guess.
And did you tell law enforcement, if my wife went missing, I'd be a wreck and would be out looking for her?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to leading.
I agree. You've asked a question. You have to ask open-ended questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Would looking at your statement refresh your recollection about what you said?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Now, Mr. Blaser, I'm showing you it's been marked as exhibit number 52.
I gotta put these on.
Sure.
Can't see.
I need those too. Does this appear to be the two-page statement that you
Yes.
had given to law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Blaser, let's let the question be asked before you provide an answer.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Otherwise, we talk over each other. That's not good.
So if you could read the statement,
Okay.
just the sentence, if my wife, what you said.
Your Honor, I believe that she was refreshing his recollection. If he wants to read it, I think it's a different issue here. He's reading what was written down by a police officer, not from his own recollection. So I'm asking that he answers only from his recollection, not from a written statement that an officer wrote that he may have given.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Lumsdahl.
Your Honor, the whole point under evidence is if we're refreshing his recollection, he looks at it, refreshes, and then indicates what it said. So I can ask it in that manner.
I'm fine with her asking it.
As long as he doesn't read it. I mean, he can read it to himself personally, but not out loud, is what I'm
I
saying.
can call the officer to admit it into evidence for him to read it as well. But I'll ask him to refresh his recollection then.
Okay, very good.
So you understand, Mr. Blake, amongst all this lawyer talk. What we're asking is, after you've now read that, does that refresh your recollection about what you said?
Yes.
And what was that?
That if my wife would have been missing, I would have not went into work. I would have been out looking for her.
So based upon that statement, you believe that it wasn't reasonable that he did that at that time?
Objection, Your Honor, that she's asking for whether or not it was reasonable for Mr. Prokopovitz to be looking for his wife or not.
Yeah,
This is-
I agree. You don't have to go on. I agree. Besides that, it's leading, so I am going to agree with the objection.
Thank you, Your
Go
Honor.
ahead, Ms. Lumko, do you have anything else?
At the time that you gave the statement, there were various ponds that you were hauling things to, the loads, is that right?
Yes, there always was, yes.
So when we're talking about ponds, is that separate from the landfill?
No, the ponds are at the landfill. Actually, we call them cells, but pond cells, it's the same
Oh, okay, so
figuration.
it was what I was asking about earlier. Ponds or cells, you kind of mean they're the same thing?
They're the same entity,
All
same
right.
thing.
And previously, when you spoke to law enforcement, and again, I know this was some time ago, but you articulated what were all the various ponds or cells that you were bringing things to. Do you remember that?
Well, there were different numbers of cells, but I can't remember which ones they are today, but there was, I remember there was like cell 9 and cell 10 and cell 11, but I can't remember just exactly which ones we were hauling to. At that point in time, I knew, because it was all fresh in my mind, but sitting here today, I can't remember.
Absolutely. And if at that time you said it was 6,
Your Honor, again, leading.
I have no problem showing him this again, Your Honor. I think I
Why
was
don't you
moving
do
it
that?
along. Thank you.
Why don't you do that? Thank
Would-
you.
Would looking at your statement assist you in recalling the ponds that you were
Sure, it
delivering?
would, yeah.
Thank you.
And Ms. Lemko, just so we have it clear for the record, what's that marked?
Sure. I'm showing the witness exhibit 52.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, again, Mr. Blaser, in looking at exhibit 52, which you identified as your statement, do you see the second to last statement about which bonds,
Yes, I do see it.
at that time, which ones were you delivering to?
6, 11, and 12.
So there were multiple ones.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the stability of these cells or these ponds, so the jury would understand with respect to a sludge pond, that is a more vast area that things are dumped into, waste is dumped into. Is that right?
Yes.
And with respect to the sludge going in there, if something would go in there, is that something that could no longer be seen at some point?
Depends how heavy it is, if it sinks or not.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeAngelo, anything you'd like to ask?
Yes. Now, sir, when you went into Georgia Pacific, did you have to swipe a card to open up a gate?
Yes.
Okay. And those gates weren't, you mentioned that you got a card at the beginning of the day.
Yep.
Did you have to meet with somebody to get your card?
Yeah, there was a girl or a guy in the guard shack, and they'd give you a badge.
So anybody from McKeefre's that was going into Georgia Pacific, they'd have to get a card in the morning before they
Yes.
could go in and out?
Yes.
So they have to meet with somebody, right?
Yes, they had to meet with somebody from the mill to get in there. You weren't getting in there.
Okay, so once you got your card, then you could go in and out, but
Right.
and to the best of your recollection, there was always somebody at Georgia Pacific. It wasn't like you got there first thing in the morning and you were one of the first people there, correct?
Right. You had to get a badge to get in, or you weren't getting in.
Okay.
That's pretty much the way it was.
And when the state was asking you that there wasn't always people watching, but to the best of your recollection, there was always somebody walking around or somebody watching you if you're going too fast or too slow or if you weren't in the area.
Yes, yes. From daylight time, there was always somebody walking around there.
And if you were in an area that you weren't supposed to be, did you get waved or flagged down?
Oh, somebody, because I was told the one time I went to get a chain out of the one thing, and I didn't stop and talk to one of the guys that were working in the yard, and I went in there, I was going to get a chain, and I got my rear end chewed out.
Okay. So as you said, somebody's watching.
Right, exactly.
And when it comes to talking to Mr. Prokopovitz, basically our conversation is, which site am I going to get whatever I'm hauling that day, right?
Pretty much.
Okay. You guys never talked about personal family
We
issues?
never talked about the weather, let's put it that way. We
Okay.
just-
So if it wasn't work-related, it wasn't talked about?
Right.
Okay. And I want to talk a little bit about how often were you running back and forth to these, from between Georgia Pacific to the dump site?
Depended upon the day. I mean, a busy day, you made 8, 9 loads. A slow day, you made 6.
And was Mr. Prokopovitch the only one operating a payloader, or was there other people operating payloaders?
When Curly was our loader operator, there was probably, I can maybe count, maybe 5 days that he wasn't there for personal reasons.
So, unless he wasn't moving, he was at work?
Right.
Okay. So to say that you found out his wife went missing, you thought it was odd, but you don't really know Curly that well to know if that was just, his work was his, kind of his outlet.
Right, you know, and I don't know him well enough to know what, you know.
And let's talk about the ponds or cells. You call them ponds or cells, right?
Right.
When people hear the term pond, they think it's just full of water. That's not what these are, correct?
No, they're not. They're actually, if you just think of a big bowl, and you back up to this big bowl and you dump into it, and once it starts getting full, then they take a cat and they keep shoving it until it gets full.
So you're dumping outside the bowl and they just keep shoveling into the bowl. At some point, can some of those times those cats or those trucks drive onto this pondish or cell?
Yeah, but it can be tricky.
Sure. But, I mean, it's not like it's full of water, it's just more full of sludge, which is solid.
Exactly.
So when you're talking about ash, that's a solid product.
Yes.
When you're talking about paper sludge, that's, I mean, it's slimy, but it's
Right.
more of a solid product.
Well, just to be brief, the North Bay sludge was kind of sloppier and the South Bay sludge was kind of drier.
Okay. Do you recall in 2013 if you were hauling the sloppier stuff or the drier stuff?
It just depended what they were spitting out of there.
When would you dump the sloppier stuff with the drier stuff in the same cell?
Sometimes, you know, to mix it up a little bit, yeah,
Just to kind of keep it from being just all mushy water?
exactly,
Because at some point you have to cap it, right?
right.
And the term capping it is essentially putting more dirt over it and locking it down.
Yeah, they had like a mixture of stuff that they put over the top of it.
Okay. And would you say that calling them a pond is just a name, but not really actually what they are?
Yeah, like I say, my bosses called it a cell, and, you know, I don't know where this pond thing come from, but anyway, we always called it a cell. It was always cell 11 or cell 6 or whatever. We never.
But just for the jury to understand, when people say ponds, they're not the water ponds that you can go fishing and swimming in.
Exactly, they're not, they're far from that.
All right. And it's not something that you have seen sometimes trucks go onto these cells. You've dumped onto these cells.
You have to answer aloud.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, and then you can dump on top of these cells.
Yes, how can I explain this? You can once this sludge dries a little bit, you can creep out onto it a little bit, but you can't back where the fresh stuff is because you'll go boom.
Okay. And do you recall, how do you get into this dump area? Do you have to have permission or access?
Well, the landfill wasn't under high security, you might say. The CAT operator, if he seen somebody out there that wasn't authorized, he'd chase them out of there, you know,
Do you know what time the CAT operator usually got there in the morning?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. So you couldn't get out there before 7 because it wasn't
Right, because
open?
he had the key to the gate.
You had to have a key to the gate to get in, and it had to be after 7.
Yep.
Do you know what time it closes at night?
5 o'clock, I think, but we didn't always leave it open till 5 o'clock. When we were done at the end of the day, because sometimes, you know, the mill went down or whatever, and there wouldn't be sludge to haul or whatever, and we were done by 11 o'clock, noon, we'd lock the gates and go home or go haul something else, you know, go haul gravel or something.
And who, is it the CAT operator that has the key?
I had a key because sometimes on Sunday, when I'd haul to Grand Tech, I would go out there and haul a couple loads and then, but I'd always lock it, you know. I wouldn't never leave it open. I'd just go out there, dump my load and get out of there.
And on the morning of the 26th, do you recall, did you open the gate or did somebody else?
No, Bob opened it.
Okay. Do you know how many keys were out there for the gates, or was it only the truck drivers that had the keys?
I was the only driver that had a key.
You were the only driver that had the key?
Right.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes. Back in 2013, if Curly told law enforcement he had a key, you're not the only one, you're the only truck driver you knew had a key.
Right.
Okay, so you're not going to dispute what he's indicated, There were other keys out there.
Right, because you know, like Bob had a key, and I know
Sure.
Pat McKeefery had a key, and,
Sure, but the general hours were 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. out at the
Right.
sludge, or the landfill, I
right,
should say.
right.
And with respect to that, you're aware, there are no cameras out there.
Right,
There's no video surveillance of who's out there.
Nope.
With respect to the time frame that anybody would be out there, you're testifying with respect to the work hours of when people were there, 7 to 5.
right,
You've already just articulated an incident where you were there on the weekend, outside those general hours. So somebody who has a key could get in there after hours.
yes,
Sure. So with respect to that, when you've also talked about the sludge versus the ash, you were asked some questions regarding, you could drive a truck on this, but isn't it true that not in all the cells could you start driving a truck on anything?
yeah, there were some of the spots were really soft, you could not
Sure.
drive on there,
Because ash, that's more solid, right?
right,
Sludge, that's a little more unstable.
right,
And in fact, would you agree, with respect to that, there are some areas that are almost like quicksand, that it is something that is liquefied?
there were some soft spots, yes.
Sure. And with respect to those areas then, it's your testimony that typically what was done is a vehicle's backed up to it and then stuff is dumped into it, right?
Yes, sorry,
And with regard to that, whatever's in there, as you're dumping things, you're not really looking at what's in there. Is that right?
well, you watch, I mean, to make sure that it, you know, once you start dumping, you kind of, I always kind of rolled ahead a little bit and watched as it was coming out, and when I knew it was quit coming, that I could put the box back down.
But you yourself aren't looking at what's already in there every time you're going there.
No, I guess not, you know. I mean,
Okay. So as we're now describing, you were asked questions about Georgia Pacific, where you indicated there was a gatekeeper. There's no gatekeeper at that sludge pond.
No,
And anybody that had a key could be getting in there.
yes.
Now, I have no further questions.
Thank you. Do you have any recross?
Sir, when regards to these cells, how often will you be dumping off of an edge where it was kind of deep? Do you recall?
When we'd start a new cell, you know,
At that time in 2013, were there any new cells that you remember?
I'd be lying if I said I can't remember.
And as far as the state asked you a question about, you know, kind of like quicksand, but if something fell in there, it wouldn't sink all the way to the bottom, correct?
I don't think it's that soupy, you know,
Okay.
because, I know that one spot, the one time Bob forgot and drove out there and the cat got stuck, but it didn't sink out of sight. We hooked 2 dump trucks to it and pulled it back out. you
Okay.
know.
So, and the only reason it sunk is because it's a Bobcat, it's pretty heavy, correct?
Well, it's a big caterpillar, you know, bulldozer kind of
Yeah.
a thing.
Do you know how heavy that is?
Very heavy.
Very heavy, okay.
I'm just guessing that big cat that's out there, I would say probably 30, 40 ton at least. It's a big cat.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You are excused then. Thank you very much, and you're free to go. And we'll, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we'll take the morning recess. We'll reconvene at about 10:27. Thank you.
Thank
Stand
you.
for the jury, please.